Ladies and gentlemen, today for the keynote address, we have an inspiring personality amongst us, Ms. Naina Lal Kidwai. Ms. Naina Lal Kidwai is the Chairman Rothschild India, Senior Advisor Advent Private Equity, and a non-executive director on the boards of Holcim, Gland Pharma, UPL, and Biocon. She has been past president of the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, and retired in December 2015 as the Executive Director on the board of HSBC Asia Pacific and Chairman HSBC India. And in April 2018 as a non-executive director on the Global Board of Nestle. She chairs the Primary Markets Advisory Committee of SEBI. She is member of the Indo-ASEAN Business Council, the Army Group Insurance Funds Indo-ASEAN Business Council, the Army Group Insurance Funds Investment and Advisory Committee, the Harvard Business School South Asia Advisory Board, Standard Chartered Banks International Advisory Council, and the Mission Board of EQT Future Fund. An MBA from Harvard Business School, she is the recipient of several awards and honors, including the Padma Shri for the contribution to trade and industry. She is engaged with institutions in environment, water, and sanitation, and has authored 3 books, including the bestsellers 30 Women Power. And ladies and gentlemen, on that note, please welcome Ms. Naina Lal Kidwai for the keynote address.
Wow, I hardly expected such a long introduction. But let me start by saying I'm absolutely honored to be here. In my career as CEO of the bank at HSBC, and indeed when I was heading Morgan Stanley before that, I think the most important partnership I had in my top team was not my CFO, not my head of marketing, but indeed was my head of human resources. The most important co-pilot for me at the organization. So to be in your midst today as HR specialists, or yes, looking at innovation is for me an honor. So thank you for being here today. I was having what is probably one of the more interesting morning chats ever, talking with Lakshmi, who is clearly one of the best leaders in this space and always, always full of ideas. So thank you, Lakshmi, for giving me that lovely morning burst. Mr. Mohapatra, who I have known in his role at IOC, again, the leadership you provide at the FICCI committee is clearly a terrific service to industry. And wonderful to see you here, man. You come with such an important sector and knowledge therein. So for me, today is special, an opportunity to kick off something which is very, very important. So I'd like to start by really saying and believing that we in India have a core of innovation. I've worked across geographies. I've led teams in countries primarily in Asia, in the Asia Pacific. And I was always struck by how lateral thinking our people are and how frustrating it was for me to work in communities who were brilliant on execution, dare I say, better than us, but very narrow. You give them a job to be done, it will get done. But will they open their eyesight to looking laterally? Will they look at working in teams? Can they work across verticals? They do, but they need a lot more hand-holding than maybe our people do. We are gregarious by nature. We like working in teams. And I do believe we have this innate innovation, whether it's called jugaad or whatever, but it's there in us. So let us, as leaders, enable this to thrive, guide it, because if we don't guide it, we all revert to working in verticals, not working across teams. And I think that is where firms like Accenture who've understood the importance of putting these teams together across different disciplines is when you create the next agenda. And hearing both Mr. Mohapatra and Lakshmi before me, it brought back memories of, well, 17, 18 years ago, as when I took over as head of the bank in India, HSBC. Diversity was a very new thing at the time. And there was a diversity initiative starting globally, and I put my hand up to basically support it across Asia Pacific, and India became an innovation hub. So I set up teams, which was really largely women in middle management downwards. We didn't have many, in fact, really any senior women, except my head of HR, who was actually responsible for helping to construct this. And these teams, I had them all report to my top team, which were all male, every single one of them. A team that's delivered to me in a traditional sort of professional organization, not handpicked by me at the time, although I had an opportunity to change them as I went along. And this team had to then run these women's groups, which were basically there on a diversity and inclusion agenda to come up with ideas. And from this came one of the most, I would say, interesting innovations in the banking sector in India, which was a 5-day week. Now, how simple does that look? We are in a 5-day week right now, but all banks at the time worked through a 6-day week. And it's staring you in the face, but none of us had thought to change it. And it took these young women sitting in groups saying, what makes our organization more receptive? It was, more to gender, but actually it made it a more exciting environment for everyone. Why do we have to come on trains for 3 hours in Bombay on a Saturday for a half day? And so what we do is, so you innovate, the teams decide how it'll work, you move to a 5-day week, you keep your branches open for customers on the 6th day, it's easy enough to work on a roster. And the great thing is the whole organization, because I basically said, look guys, this is an experiment. We have 5-day weeks elsewhere in the world. It's new in India. If productivity goes down, this gets shut down. So the whole team, men, women, everyone, wanting the 5-day week to work, productivity goes up. We actually tacked on half an hour more to the day. And indeed, everyone was out to prove that this is going to work. And we had a huge saving on costs by keeping offices closed on Saturday on the one hand, and on the other, people just wanting to make this work. So I think the core of this is these ideas, they just sit there. And we don't even see it. I mean, sitting at the top, we've been running this bank forever. Did it even strike us that, hey, by the way, staring you in the face, do a 5-day week? Even the Reserve Bank of India, I get calls to say, what is this nonsense? What have you started? My competition's laughing. This is some stupid idea of this, first-time woman CEO. She thinks she can change the banking industry. And lo and behold, we attract talent. 2 years later, every bank is on that 5-day week. So my learning very early was, of course, one, have a phenomenal HR team, because they help craft it. But they cannot do it alone. You need the entire organization. You need your top team, your leadership driving the agenda. But setting the agenda, making sure we're thinking through it to make it succeed, the HR team is a very important co-pilot. And on the other, hear every idea. And Lakshmi said this, it's that enabling environment. Because those ideas are just sitting there, they're bubbling in there. There are people who can indeed lead you to what can be really fabulous changes going forward. And another important take was it only works when you work in teams. The idea may have been a thought thrown up by an individual, but to make it work, to build the community that needs to make it happen, sometimes even to create that idea, you do need the teams. So how do we build this collaboration and team? And in fact, one of the biggest challenges for that has been the work from home thinking. So, and I'm all in favor of work from home, but in creating the work from home environment, let's not lose what that collaboration can be in terms of how you set the roster of who comes to office when, and create the teams which don't just meet as a team within that vertical, but teams across verticals, so that the innovation, the spirit of working together, the understanding of the organization across where you work becomes important as well. So let's foster that innate innovation. I mean, we are at the end of the day a country who builds the Mars orbiter. First attempt is a tribute to frugal innovation across the world. The patents we have as a country, the way I mean, it's now 66,500 odd patents filed just in the year 21-22. So we innovate as a country. Can we ensure that we bring this innate culture of our Indianness into our organizations? And now, of course, Startup India and all that happens therein. If we can create in our organizations that we run this spirit and nurturing of innovation, we may not lose all we do that want to go out and do a startup. It's often people who are chafing at the reins, who are saying, hey, I'm not getting the breathing space. I'm not being heard. I have an idea. Can I create and make that idea work for me in the organization I work for, instead of running out to try and start and do something on my own? And it is really, therefore, these advancements in technology that we are seeing, the global interconnectedness, I think the dynamic market shifts which have enabled us, in fact, forcing us to look at change and how we can innovate as organizations. I think for many of us, large organizations, you see the way an Accenture reinvents itself. How does an IOC respond to this? How do what were largely very bureaucratic organizations letting up and enabling that lateral thinking rather than that very traditional approach to power, empowerment, reward? And for that change, we have to create, as Lakshmi rightly said, the ecosystem, the reward system, the ability to allow people to think, to reward it, so that you can keep creating that innovation. So a very important subject, I think one which must permeate every one of our organizations, the innovation that sits in our companies, whether big or small, whether ones that will go into patents or make innovations happen at every level at which we work. And I was struck by a McKinsey report which talks of these leading innovating organizations, and some of those spaces they mention. So first and foremost, believe and value. So that's the eco culture of it. We have to believe in it, we have to value it, and then you frame and champion it. No matter what you do, you need the internal champions, external champions, even as you frame the issue. And then the signaling and symbolizing, the reward system. How do you, as a leader, visit? Do you make sure that your CEO, your top teams go visit innovation hubs? You show the importance of that particular initiative, however it is framed in the organization. So that's signaling, that's symbolizing. And then you showcase the outcomes, the reward. How do you actually make it a ritual that people can celebrate those successes? And very, very important, how do you shield? You empower, but how do you shield those very failures that will happen? No matter what we do, we will fail. And in those failures are lessons of learning. So the toleration for failure is traditionally, we all understand it, but we still don't tolerate it well, particularly in large companies. And we have to then understand that you cannot innovate without failure. So how do you recognize a failure, ensure that it doesn't happen again, share the lessons, and make sure that the team or the person that has taken it forward is not made to suffer for it, indeed, to understand and failure at every level is as much an individual thing. I have failed. I have to live with that failure. And no matter what the organization may say, it's still something that concerns me. How do you help the individual to understand that this failure may lead to the next? How do we share lessons of failure that have resulted in success? What to do, what not to do, what not to thrust under the carpet. So looking at this nourishing of innovation, there's so much that we need to change in the culture of our organizations. And it goes beyond lip service. It has to be about leading from the top and leading at every level of management. People leave companies because of poor leadership, not because of a bad CEO, but because their direct manager was a bully, did not get it, was not there for them, right? So that leadership of innovation has to permeate the organization at every level. So how do we create these agents of change at every level? And if you look at the attrition, most organizations will, yes, you have the leaky pipeline for women, but at most organizations, it's in the first 5 years. So it's those managers who are managing the young that come in, the ones that are still trying to stabilize, think through what they like and love, that how do you create that management and leadership is going to be critical in terms of the way the culture of the organization is fully permeated with this innovation culture. So a big job, one which for you is not just what you implement if you are indeed the HR specialist, but how you rally the troops, how you rally the managers, how you rally those that won't change, and it's often right at the top to drive this change. My biggest learning when I put together those groups was not so much that these young women had an issue, but my direct team of leaders, the men who had been in banking for the last 30 years, how were they going to change? And some of them had the grace to say that this exercise was one of their biggest learnings, to come back with ideas from young people who were brave enough to sometimes give what may have been stupid ideas, but every idea had a value. And no idea was stupid until it was discussed, framed, rejected, accepted, and understood. So that learning for each of us at every level is important and a continuous reminder. So I'll end with a very relevant thought by Ken Robinson. The role of creative leaders is not to have all the ideas. It's to create a culture everyone can have ideas and feel that they are valued. So on that note, thank you all for being part of this extraordinary journey, and I wish you a fruitful and inspiring Innovation Summit. Thank you.